My name is Autumn Reynolds. I'm 28 years old, and I never expected to be disowned on Thanksgiving Day. After 2 years away building my finance career in New York, I returned to Nashville with homemade pie and carefully chosen gifts. I parked in the driveway of my childhood home, heart fluttering with anticipation. When Dad opened the door, his face hardened. "We don't have a daughter," he said coldly. "Please leave." Behind him, my brother Ryan smirked, jingling my old room keys on his keychain. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe. To understand why my father's words crushed me so completely that day, you need to know about the Reynolds family of East Nashville. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. My father, Thomas Reynolds, built custom homes and had a reputation for quality craftsmanship. My mother, Diane, taught second grade at the local elementary school. My brother Ryan was 3 years younger than me, with our father's charismatic smile and athletic build. Then there was me, bookish, practical, and determined. The first 10 years of my life were genuinely happy. Dad would swing me onto his shoulders during neighborhood barbecues, proudly telling everyone I was his little investment banker because I was so careful with my allowance. Mom would bake my favorite lemon squares when I aced a test. Ryan and I would build elaborate forts in the backyard, plotting imaginary adventures together. The shift happened gradually. When I turned 11, Dad's business hit a rough patch after the housing market stumbled. His temper grew shorter. At dinner, he'd dissect every minor expense, his eyes particularly cold when discussing anything related to me, my growing need for school supplies, musical instrument rentals for band, or new clothes as I outgrew old ones. "Girls are expensive," he'd mutter to my mother, as though I wasn't sitting right there. "All these extra things she needs." Ryan never faced the same scrutiny. His baseball equipment, summer camps, and later, his car insurance were considered investments, not burdens. "A boy needs to establish himself," Dad would say. Mom never contradicted him. She'd give me apologetic glances across the dinner table but remained silent. Later, she'd slip me a few extra dollars from her teaching salary or find creative ways to get me what I needed without Dad noticing. "Just keep your head down and do well in school," she'd whisper. "Education is your ticket." I took her advice seriously. While Ryan became the star quarterback and Dad's constant companion on fishing trips, I disappeared into my studies. The library became my sanctuary. My grades were perfect. I joined every academic club and competition I could find, partly because I loved learning, but also because most activities were free or school-funded. By 16, I knew my only escape would be through scholarships. I researched colleges obsessively, calculated GPA requirements, and practiced for the SAT using borrowed prep books. When other teens were at parties, I was working part-time at the local bookstore, saving every dollar. The night I received my acceptance letter to NYU's Stern School of Business with a nearly full scholarship, I thought Dad might finally show some pride. Instead, he frowned at the dinner table. "New York will eat you alive," he said flatly. "You should stay local. Save money." "The scholarship covers almost everything," I explained. "And I've saved enough for the rest." "You'll be back within a semester," Ryan snickered. He was failing half his classes despite Dad paying for private tutors. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, she slipped a small envelope under my door containing $500 and a note, "For your new start. I believe in you." I left for New York 2 months later. Dad drove me to the airport in silence. My final memory of that day was watching Mom wave from the doorway, looking somehow both sad and hopeful. The first year at NYU was brutal. The culture shock of Manhattan, the academic rigor, the sophistication of my classmates, everything intimidated me. But I was used to working twice as hard for half the recognition. I found affordable housing with 3 roommates in Brooklyn. I secured an on-campus job and a weekend position at a cafe. I graduated in the top 5% of my class. My first job out of college was at a boutique financial firm. The starting salary seemed astronomical compared to what I'd grown up with. Within 3 years, I was promoted twice. By 26, I was handling accounts for wealthy clients, earning performance bonuses, and finally living in Manhattan in my own studio apartment. Contact with my family during those years was sparse but civil. I'd call on holidays and birthdays. Mom would fill me in on neighborhood gossip. Dad would briefly grumble about taxes or politics before passing the phone back. Ryan occasionally texted when he needed money, which I sometimes sent against my better judgment. I hadn't been home in over 2 years. Work was always too demanding, and truth be told, the distance felt protective. When my latest promotion to senior financial analyst came through last month, something shifted in me. I felt established enough, secure enough, to revisit my roots without being pulled back into old patterns. I wanted to share my success with my family, perhaps finally earn my father's approval. So I requested Thanksgiving week off, booked a flight to Nashville, and called my mother. "I'm coming home for Thanksgiving," I told her. The silence lasted a beat too long before she responded. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. We'll need to prepare the guest room." "My old room is fine," I said. Another pause. "Of course, that would be fine too." Something in her tone should have warned me, but I was too focused on the fantasy of a warm homecoming to notice. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with careful preparation. I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent a Saturday at Bloomingdale's selecting gifts, a handcrafted leather wallet for Dad, a cashmere scarf for Mom in her favorite shade of blue, and a vintage Nashville Sounds baseball cap for Ryan that cost more than I wanted to admit. I had them professionally wrapped in elegant paper with real ribbon. My friend Samantha, who had known me since college and heard all my family's stories over late-night study sessions and countless brunches, watched my preparations with growing concern. "Are you sure about this, Autumn?" she asked as we shared dinner at my apartment, a week before my departure. "Every time you talk to your family, you're upset for days afterward." "It's different now," I insisted, carefully placing the gifts in my carry-on. "I'm different. I'm not that desperate to please girl anymore. I'm financially independent, professionally successful. Maybe now Dad will finally see me as an adult worth respecting." Samantha set down her wine glass. "You don't need his validation. You never did." "I know that," I said, not entirely convincingly. "But they're still my family." "Just promise me you'll call if things get weird," she said. "And remember you can leave anytime. You have the means now." I promised, but privately thought she was overreacting. In my mind, I'd constructed a Thanksgiving scene worthy of a Hallmark movie, my parents proudly introducing their successful daughter to neighbors, Ryan and I laughing about childhood memories, Mom and I cooking together in the kitchen while Dad carved the turkey, his eyes finally warm with approval. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I boarded my flight from JFK to Nashville International. The plane was packed with holiday travelers, everyone either excited or stressed. I fell somewhere in between. As Manhattan disappeared below the clouds, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread settling in my stomach. During the flight, I reviewed client portfolios on my laptop, partly to pass the time and partly to remind myself of who I'd become. By the time we landed in Nashville, I had fortified myself with enough professional confidence to face whatever awaited me at home. The Nashville air hit me as I exited the airport, warmer than New York, with that distinctive southern dampness I'd forgotten. I collected my rental car, a modest sedan despite my ability to afford something flashier. Old habits die hard, and I still couldn't bring myself to flaunt my success too blatantly. I called home while navigating the familiar highway toward East Nashville. Mom answered on the 4th ring. "Hi, Mom. I just landed. I should be there in about 40 minutes. "Oh, Autumn." Her voice sounded thin, almost nervous. "Actually, we're running some errands. Could you come a bit later? Maybe around 4? It was only noon. "That's a long time," I said, surprised. I could meet you somewhere for lunch. No, she said quickly. We have some things to take care of. You know how your father gets before holidays. Everything needs to be perfect. The old familiar pattern, accommodating Dad's moods. Sure, Mom. I'll find something to do. Thank you, sweetie. We'll see you at 4. She hung up before I could respond. To kill time, I drove through my old neighborhood, noting the changes. New coffee shops had replaced the corner stores I remembered. Young couples pushed expensive strollers past renovated craftsman houses. East Nashville had become trendy in my absence, the kind of up-and-coming area featured in travel magazines. Our street, however, looked much the same. Modest homes with small yards, American flags, and basketball hoops. I drove past our house without stopping, oddly reluctant to arrive before expected. Through the windows, I could see movement. Someone was definitely home despite what Mom had said. I ended up at Samantha's cousin's house across town. Melissa had always been kind to me in high school and had stayed in Nashville after college. When I called, she immediately invited me over. Use my kitchen if you want, she offered. I know you mentioned bringing a homemade pie. So I spent the afternoon making my grandmother's apple pie recipe, a peace offering of sorts. As I peeled apples and rolled dough, Melissa chatted about local gossip, carefully avoiding direct questions about my family. She'd always been perceptive. How are things really, Autumn? She finally asked as I crimped the edges of the pie crust. Good. Great, actually. Work is amazing. And coming home? How's that feel? I paused, cinnamon and sugar on my fingers. Honestly? Like I'm 16 again, trying to prove my worth. She nodded knowingly. Family has a way of shrinking us back to our smallest selves. Not this time, I said firmly, sliding the pie into her oven. I'm not that person anymore. At 10 minutes to 4, I thanked Melissa, carefully placed the still warm pie on the passenger seat of my rental car, and headed to my parents' house. The November sun was already low in the sky, casting long shadows across familiar lawns. My stomach knotted with each turn, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I parked in the driveway behind Dad's truck and Ryan's motorcycle. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The blue paint faded, the front porch sagging slightly. For a moment, I sat in the car, gathering courage. Then I collected my suitcase, the gifts, and the pie and walked up the path to the front door. I couldn't free a hand to knock, so I tapped the door gently with my foot. Footsteps approached from inside, and then the door swung open. My father stood in the doorway. He looked older, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. For a split second, I saw surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by something colder. Dad, I said, smiling despite the sudden chill. Happy early Thanksgiving. That's when he said the words that would change everything. We don't have a daughter. Please leave. Time seemed to slow down as my father's words hung in the air between us. His face was set in that familiar stubborn expression I'd known all my life, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth that betrayed his tension. Behind him, I could see Ryan leaning against the wall of the entryway, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing on his lips. The keys to my old room dangled from his finger, deliberately visible, a calculated taunt. In the background, partially obscured by my father's broad shoulders, my mother stood frozen near the kitchen doorway. Her eyes met mine for just a moment before she looked away, her hand rising to touch the cross necklace she always wore when anxious. Dad, I said again, my voice steadier than I felt. What are you talking about? I told Mom I was coming. We spoke just a few hours ago. That was a mistake, he said flatly. There's nothing for you here anymore. Ryan pushed himself off the wall and stepped closer. Dad made himself clear, Autumn. Family's only for people who stick around, not those who think they're too good for us. The pie was growing heavy in my hands. I could smell the cinnamon and apples, still warm from Melissa's oven. The absurdity of standing on the porch with homemade pie and Christmas-wrapped presents while being told I didn't exist nearly made me laugh. "Can I at least come in and talk about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "It's cold out here." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad said. His eyes flicked to the expensive watch on my wrist, the designer coat I wore. "You made your choice when you left. Ryan's been handling the family responsibilities while you've been off playing big shot in New York." Mom finally stepped forward. "Thomas, maybe we should stay out of this, Diane," he snapped without looking at her. She immediately retreated, her shoulders curving inward. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't anger or even hurt, but a sudden, crystal-clear recognition. This was never going to change. No amount of success, no perfectly baked pie, no expensive gift was going to make my father see me as worthy. The fantasy I'd constructed of a warm family reconciliation evaporated like morning dew. I carefully set the pie and gifts down on the porch swing. Then I straightened, meeting my father's gaze directly. Without breaking eye contact, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked, his smirk faltering slightly. I didn't answer him. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, found the number I needed, and pressed call. The phone rang twice before being answered. "Hello, this is Autumn Reynolds," I said in my professional voice, the one I used with high-value clients. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Harrington in mortgage services, please." My father's expression flickered. A hint of confusion crossed his face. "Jim, hi, it's Autumn," I continued when the bank representative came on the line. "Yes, I'm actually standing outside the property right now. There seems to be some confusion about access. Could you please confirm for me the status of the mortgage on 1842 Eastland Avenue?" Ryan stepped fully into the doorway now, standing beside our father. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. I held up one finger, listening to Jim on the phone. "That's correct. And could you confirm the name on the mortgage since April 2022? Yes. Thank you, Jim. And just to clarify, as the mortgage holder, I have full legal rights to access the property, correct?" "Perfect. I appreciate your help." I ended the call and returned the phone to my pocket. The November wind picked up, rustling the dried leaves around my feet. In the neighbor's yard, their wind chimes played a discordant melody. "What was that?" my father asked, his voice less certain now. "That was the bank confirming that I've been paying the mortgage on this house for the past 3 years, I said calmly. "Ever since you nearly lost it to foreclosure in 2022. The color drained from my father's face. Ryan's smirk disappeared entirely. "That's not possible," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is possible, and it's true," I replied. $3,427 every month, automatically transferred from my account to Nashville First Bank. I have the statements if you'd like to see them. From inside the house, I heard my mother's soft gasp. She moved forward into the light of the entryway, her face pale. "Thomas? Is this true? Was the house in foreclosure?" My father didn't answer her. His eyes remained fixed on me, a strange mixture of anger and something else, fear, perhaps, or shame, crossing his features. "You had no right," he finally said, his voice low and dangerous. "Actually, I had every legal right," I corrected him. "The bank was ready to take the house. They called me as your next of kin when they couldn't reach you after repeated attempts. I made a business decision to take over the loan rather than let this house go into foreclosure and ruin your credit even further." Ryan's face had transformed from smug to stunned. "That's bull. Dad would have told us if something like that happened." I turned my attention to my brother. Would he, Ryan? The way he told Mom about your gambling debts? Or the way he explained that his business has been failing for the past 5 years? That hit home. Ryan's eyes darted to our father, then back to me. "How did you?" "I'm a financial analyst, Ryan. It's literally my job to follow money trails. Did you think I wouldn't notice when Dad liquidated his retirement account to cover your losses? Or when he took out a second mortgage to prop up a failing business?" My mother stepped fully into the doorway now, pushing between the two men. Autumn, please. Come inside. We need to talk about this privately. No, Mom. I don't think we do. I gestured toward the street, where neighbors were beginning to take notice of our doorstep drama. Mrs. Patterson across the street had paused while collecting her mail, watching us with undisguised interest. Dad made his position clear. He doesn't have a daughter. And that's fine. But he should understand what that really means now. The tension on our front porch had become a tangible thing, thick as the humidity that clings to Nashville in summer. My mother's eyes darted between my father and me, her hands twisting the hem of her cardigan. Ryan had backed away slightly, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like calculation, trying to figure out how this revelation would affect him personally. You've been paying our mortgage? Mom finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For 3 years. I nodded. It started during my last visit home for Christmas in 2022. Remember how I arrived a day early because of the weather warnings? You and Ryan were out shopping and Dad was at a job site. The memory was crystal clear, coming into the empty house, deciding to surprise them by decorating for Christmas. Opening the desk drawer in the family office to look for tape and finding instead a stack of papers with bold red lettering, final notice and foreclosure proceeding. I found the foreclosure notices, I continued. Not just one, but several. The earliest dated back 6 months. The house was scheduled for auction in January. Dad's face had gone from pale to flushed. You had no business going through my private papers. I wasn't snooping, I said evenly. I was looking for Scotch tape to hang Christmas garlands. But what I found was evidence that you were about to lose the family home and hadn't told anyone. My mother turned to my father, her expression stricken. Thomas? Is this true? Were we about to lose the house? Dad's jaw worked silently for a moment. It was a temporary setback. I had it under control. No, you didn't, I said, not unkindly. You were 3 months from auction. Your credit score had tanked. You'd already refinanced twice and were underwater on the loan. How dare you, he began, but I cut him off. I'm not judging you, Dad. The housing market crashed. A lot of builders went under. But instead of being honest about it, you kept up appearances while everything crumbled around you. Ryan had gone very still. What does this have to do with me? I met my brother's eyes. The second mortgage Dad took out in 2021? $80,000? That money didn't go to business expenses like Mom was told. It went to cover your gambling debts at River Rock Casino. Ryan's face flushed. That's a lie. I have the bank records, Ryan. And the loan application where Dad listed business expansion as the purpose. What I don't have is any evidence of business expansion during that period. What I do have are records of cash withdrawals that exactly match payments made to your creditors. My mother pressed a hand to her mouth. Ryan? You were gambling. Ryan looked away, his defiance crumbling. My father stepped in front of him protectively. That's enough. This is family business. Private business. It became my business when I started paying for it, I replied. Do you know what I did after finding those foreclosure notices? I called the bank while you were all still out. I identified myself as your daughter and asked to speak to someone about the loan. They transferred me to the foreclosure department. I remembered that conversation vividly, sitting at my father's desk, my Christmas sweater suddenly too warm, speaking with a sympathetic loan officer named Jim Harrington. Mr. Harrington explained the situation. You were over $17,000 behind on payments. The property was scheduled for auction on January 15th. There was still a chance to stop the foreclosure, but it required bringing the loan current immediately and demonstrating ability to make future payments. My father's face had gone from angry to ashen. This was the conversation he'd been dreading for years, the moment his financial house of cards collapsed publicly. I made a decision that day, I continued. I paid the $17,000 to bring the loan current. Then I worked with the bank to refinance the mortgage in my name, with you and Mom as authorized occupants. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. They wouldn't allow that without my signature. They did when I showed them proof that I could make the payments and you couldn't, I said. Your signature is on the papers, Dad. You signed them on December 26th, 2022. You probably don't remember because you told everyone you were going to the hardware store, but you actually went to the bank. You signed the refinance documents thinking it was a payment deferral program. My father's expression confirmed my words. He remembered. You tricked me, he said, but the accusation sounded hollow. I saved your home, I corrected. And then I went back to New York and have been paying $3,427 every month since then to keep this roof over your heads. That's over $123,000 over the past 3 years. My mother began to cry softly. Why didn't you tell us? Would Dad have accepted my help if I'd offered it directly? I asked gently. You know he wouldn't have. His pride wouldn't allow it. My father's shoulders slumped slightly, the first crack in his rigid posture. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and my mother's quiet sniffles. All this time, she finally said, when you said you couldn't come home for holidays because of work. I was working extra accounts, taking on additional clients, I confirmed. Making sure I could cover both my Manhattan rent and your mortgage. I didn't trust that Dad would prioritize the house payment if I just sent money. Ryan had slumped against the doorframe, the keys to my room no longer jingling in his hand, but hanging limply at his side. Jesus, Autumn. Why would you do that for us? Especially when we've been so. He couldn't finish the sentence. Because you're my family, I said simply. Even when you've pushed me away, even when you've made me feel worthless, you're still my family. I didn't want Mom to lose her home because of Dad's pride or your mistakes. The weight of my words settled over us all. Years of secrets, of pretense, of financial struggle carefully hidden behind my father's facade of success, all of it exposed in the fading November light. My father finally looked at me directly, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. What he saw seemed to confuse him, not the desperate-to-please daughter he could dismiss, but a woman who had quietly saved them all while asking nothing in return. You could have told us, he said, his voice rough. Would you have let me help if I had? I asked. His silence was answer enough. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken truths. Mrs. Patterson across the street had given up all pretense of collecting mail and was openly watching our family drama unfold. A few doors down, the Hendersons had paused while unloading groceries from their car. In our little suburban ecosystem, a confrontation like this would feed the neighborhood gossip mill for months. I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders, channeling the confidence I'd developed in boardrooms and client meetings. So, here's where we stand. Legally, I'm the owner of this house. I've been paying the mortgage, insurance, and property taxes for 3 years. According to both Tennessee property law and the specific terms of our mortgage agreement, I have the right to access this property at any time. My father's face darkened. You're threatening to throw us out of our own home? After all we've done for you. The unfairness of his statement might have crushed me once, but now it just underscored how necessary this confrontation had become. No, Dad. I'm establishing facts. You just told me you don't have a daughter and tried to turn me away from the door. I'm explaining why that's not actually your decision to make. Ryan pushed himself away from the doorframe. This is unbelievable. You show up after disappearing for years, and suddenly you own our house? What kind of sick power play is this? It's not a power play, Ryan. It's the consequence of choices. Dad chose to hide his financial problems instead of addressing them honestly. You chose to gamble away money the family didn't have. I chose to step in and prevent a disaster. We all made choices that led us here. My mother wiped her eyes and finally spoke up, her voice stronger than before. She's right, Thomas. We've been living in denial for too long. She turned to me. Autumn has every right to be here. More right than any of us, apparently. Dad's eyes snapped to Mom in surprise. She rarely contradicted him, especially in front of others. You knew about this? He demanded. She shook her head. No. But I suspected something wasn't right with our finances. The past few years, you've been so secretive, so stressed. Bills would disappear from the mail before I could see them. You changed the password on our bank account. She took a shaky breath. I told myself you were protecting me from worry. I didn't want to know how bad things really were. We would have managed, Dad insisted. Like you've been managing for the past decade? I asked quietly. By taking out loans you can't repay? By draining your retirement account to cover Ryan's debts? By nearly losing the house? The neighbors were absolutely riveted now. The Hendersons had completely abandoned their groceries in the driveway, and Mrs. Patterson had been joined by her husband on their front lawn. Part of me wanted to continue this conversation inside, away from prying eyes, but another part recognized the value of witnesses. For once, the family facade was completely stripped away. I don't need financial advice from my daughter, Dad said, but the words lacked his usual force. Apparently you do, I replied. And I'm happy to give it, along with continuing financial support. But only under certain conditions. Conditions? Ryan scoffed. Who do you think you are? I'm the person preventing this family from financial collapse, I said evenly. And my first condition is acknowledgement of that fact. No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't. No more treating me like I'm an outsider when I've been the one holding things together. My father's face was a battleground of emotions, pride warring with practicality, anger with realization. What exactly do you want, Autumn? Respect, I said simply. Not gratitude, not subservience, just basic respect. I want to be welcomed into my family home for Thanksgiving. I want honest conversations about finances instead of secrets and shame. I want to help, but as a partner, not a piggy bank. Mom stepped fully out onto the porch and took my hand. Of course you're welcome, sweetheart. This is your home too. Always has been. Dad didn't echo her sentiment, but he did step aside slightly, creating space in the doorway. It wasn't an embrace, but it was movement. I need to think, he said gruffly. This is all a lot to process. Ryan remained in the hallway, his expression unreadable. So what happens now? You're just going to hold the house over our heads forever. No, Ryan. I'm going to help this family get on solid financial ground again. But I won't enable more gambling or more secrets. That's another condition. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I don't have a problem. The credit card statements suggest otherwise, I said. We can talk about that later, in private. The November air had grown colder as the sun disappeared behind the houses across the street. I shivered slightly in my coat, suddenly aware of how drained I felt. This confrontation had taken more out of me than any high-stakes business negotiation ever had. I'm going to wait in my car for a while, I said, stepping back from the door. You all take some time to discuss what I've said. I'll come back in 30 minutes and we can decide together what Thanksgiving looks like for the Reynolds family this year. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked back to my rental car. As I settled into the driver's seat, I could see them through the front window, Mom gesturing emphatically, Dad with his arms crossed, Ryan pacing. For the first time in years, they were having an honest conversation about the state of our family. I pulled out my phone and texted Samantha. It went about as well as could be expected. Not great, not terrible. Standing my ground. Her reply came immediately. Proud of you. Need backup. I hesitated, then typed, maybe. We'll let you know in 30 minutes. True to my word, I waited in the car, watching the dashboard clock tick away minutes. After about 20 minutes, I saw Mom emerge from the house alone and walk toward my car. Her face was tear-stained, but composed. I rolled down the window as she approached. Can we talk? She asked. Mom stood beside my rental car, her cardigan pulled tight against the chill. I unlocked the passenger door, and she slid in beside me, bringing with her the familiar scent of the vanilla lotion she'd used for as long as I could remember. For a moment, we sat in silence, the car's heater humming softly. I had no idea, she finally said, her voice small. About any of it. The foreclosure, Ryan's gambling, you paying our mortgage. How could I not know these things about my own family? I reached over and took her hand. You knew something was wrong, Mom. You just didn't want to face it. None of us did. She nodded, tears forming again. Your father, he's always needed to be the provider. The strong one. When his business started struggling after the recession, it nearly broke him. Then when Ryan's problems started, she trailed off, shaking her head. Why didn't you ever stand up to him? I asked, the question I'd wanted to ask since childhood finally finding voice. All those years when he treated me differently than Ryan, when he dismissed my accomplishments, why didn't you ever say anything? Mom looked down at our joined hands. Fear, she admitted. Not of him. Your father would never hurt me physically. But fear of rocking the boat. Fear of making things worse. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really I was just avoiding conflict. She squeezed my hand. I failed you, Autumn. I thought I was protecting you by teaching you to be independent, but really I was just too cowardly to protect you directly. Her honesty was startling after so many years of evasion and gentle deflection. What changed? I asked. Seeing you stand your ground just now. Realizing that my daughter is braver than I've ever been. She looked up, her eyes wet but clear. And understanding that we were about to lose you forever over pride and secrets. Where's Dad now? In the backyard. He needs time to process. She hesitated. He's not good at admitting when he's wrong. Never has been. And Ryan? Mom's expression darkened slightly. He left. Said he needed to clear his head. Went to his friend Marcus's house, I think. She sighed. The gambling. I had suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. He's been so erratic these past few years. Money disappearing, mood swings, those mysterious business opportunities he was always just about to cash in on. I nodded. The signs were classic, textbook even. He needs help, Mom. Professional help. I know that now, she agreed. Your father always made excuses for him. He's finding himself, he's networking, it's just a rough patch. I wanted to believe it too. We sat quietly for a moment, the weight of years of family dysfunction settling between us. Then Mom straightened her shoulders. Your father would like to speak with you, she said. He's not ready to apologize, you know how he is, but he wants to talk. Actually talk. About the mortgage? About everything. I told him he needed to listen more than speak. She attempted a small smile. That's new for me too, giving him instructions. I considered this. Part of me wanted to drive away, check into a hotel, and spend Thanksgiving with Samantha's family instead. The easier path, certainly. But the harder road often led to more meaningful destinations. I'm willing to talk, I said finally. But not here, not in this house, at least not tonight. Too many emotions, too many neighbors watching. I gestured toward Mrs. Patterson, who was still finding reasons to linger in her front yard. Let's meet somewhere neutral. Dinner, maybe? Mom nodded. I'll tell him. Where? Hemingway's at 7? It's quiet there on weeknights. It was the restaurant where we'd celebrated my high school graduation, one of the last uncomplicated happy memories I had with my family. I'll make it happen, Mom promised. She leaned over and hugged me awkwardly across the center console. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for the house, but for not giving up on us completely. After she returned to the house, I texted Samantha, change of plans. Family dinner at Hemingway's at 7. Could use moral support after if you're free. Her reply, my door is open, wine is chilled. Proud of you for handling this like the badass you are. I drove around Nashville for the next few hours, reacquainting myself with the city of my youth. The trendy new coffee shops in East Nashville, the bustling downtown with its honky-donks and tourist traps, the quiet dignity of Centennial Park. By the time I arrived at Hemingway's, I felt centered again, armored in my professional identity. My parents were already seated at a corner table when I arrived. Dad stood awkwardly as I approached, a social nicety I couldn't remember him ever extending to me before. Mom smiled encouragingly as I took my seat. Ryan's absence was conspicuous. "Ryan decided not to join us," Dad said, answering my unasked question. His voice was gruff but not hostile. "Said he needed time." I nodded. "Probably for the best. We have a lot to discuss." The waiter brought water and took our drink orders. I requested sparkling water, hyper-aware that alcohol might blur the clarity I needed for this conversation. Dad ordered bourbon, Mom her usual white wine. Small talk carried us through the ordering process, comments about the restaurant's renovation, the unusually warm November, my flight from New York. Once our appetizers arrived, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother tells me you've been paying our mortgage for 3 years. Direct, as always." "Yes. Why didn't you tell us?" I set down my fork. "Would you have accepted my help if I had offered it directly?" He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Finally, he said, "It wasn't your responsibility." "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "It was yours. But when you couldn't handle it, the bank was ready to take your home. Our home. I made a business decision." "A business decision," he repeated, something like hurt flickering across his face. "That's how I had to frame it to myself," I explained. "If I thought of it emotionally, as my father rejecting my help out of pride while potentially making my mother homeless, I wouldn't have been able to function." Mom reached across the table and touched Dad's hand. "Thomas, please. Listen." He nodded stiffly, visibly restraining himself from a defensive response. "I don't want your gratitude," I continued. "I don't want control over you. What I want is honesty, respect, a relationship with my family that isn't built on pretense and disappointment." "I've never been disappointed in you," Dad said, the words seeming to surprise even him. "You've never shown anything else," I countered. "Every achievement, every milestone, college scholarship, graduation, promotions, you've dismissed or downplayed." "Because I didn't want you getting a big head," he said. "Getting overconfident. There's a difference between keeping someone humble and making them feel worthless." The words hung between us. Mom's eyes filled with tears again, but Dad's expression was one of genuine confusion. "I never thought you felt worthless," he said quietly. "Autumn, you were always the one who had everything together. Good grades, level head, clear goals. Ryan was the one who needed the extra support, the encouragement." "Support doesn't have to be a zero-sum game," I said. "Helping Ryan didn't require dismissing me." Dad looked down at his bourbon. "My father never once told me I did a good job. Not once in my entire life. He believed praise made men soft." He took a deep breath. "I didn't want to be like him, but I guess some patterns are hard to break." It wasn't an apology, but it was an explanation. More honesty than he'd offered in years. "The mortgage," he said after a moment. "What are your plans with that?" "That depends on all of us," I replied. "I'm willing to continue helping, but only if we establish some ground rules. First, complete financial transparency. I need to know where the money is going, what other debts exist, the real state of your business." Dad winced but nodded. "Second, Ryan needs professional help for his gambling. That's non-negotiable. I won't keep funding a house where he's enabled to self-destruct." "He'll resist," Mom said. "Then he can find his own place to live," I replied firmly. "I love him, but I won't finance his addiction." "And third?" Dad asked, correctly assuming there was more. "Third, we start acting like a real family. Regular communication, honesty about our lives, no more pretending. If something's wrong, we say it's wrong. If we need help, we ask for help." Mom nodded immediately. Dad took longer, wrestling with decades of conditioning about self-reliance and masculine pride. Finally, he gave a single, decisive nod. "I can try," he said. "I can't promise I'll be good at it right away." "I don't expect perfection," I assured him. "Just effort. And honesty." As our entrees arrived, something shifted in the atmosphere. Not warmth exactly, but a thawing. Dad asked questions about my job in New York. Real questions, not dismissive ones. Mom shared her worries about Ryan with a frankness she'd never allowed herself before. I found myself relaxing incrementally, allowing myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, something healthier could grow from this painful confrontation. By the time we ordered coffee, Dad had outlined the true state of his business, struggling but not beyond saving. Mom had admitted her loneliness and desire to return to teaching, and I had shared my own struggles with trust and intimacy that stemmed from our family dynamics. "I'm not sure what Thanksgiving looks like tomorrow," Mom said as we prepared to leave. "With everything out in the open now." "Maybe that's exactly what Thanksgiving should be," I suggested. "A day of genuine gratitude, not performance." Dad reached awkwardly for the check, then paused. "I suppose I should ask if you want to, given the financial situation." "It's on me," I said, sliding my credit card into the folder. "But not because I have to. Because I want to." He nodded, a complicated mixture of emotions crossing his weathered face. "Thank you, Autumn. For dinner, and for everything else." It wasn't a Hallmark movie reconciliation. There were still hurt feelings, defensive moments, and years of dysfunctional patterns to address. But it was a start, the first honest conversation our family had shared in as long as I could remember. As we walked to our separate cars, Dad hesitated, then awkwardly extended his hand to me. Not a hug, he wasn't ready for that, but a handshake, businessman to businesswoman. A gesture of respect. I took his hand and shook it firmly. "I'll see you tomorrow?" "Yes," he said. "We'll expect you around noon." It wasn't exactly a warm invitation, but the "we" included me again. It was enough for now. I spent Thanksgiving Day at Samantha's cousin Melissa's house instead of my family home. After the emotional marathon of the previous day, we all needed space to process. Mom had called in the morning, her voice tentative but warm. "We understand if you need some time," she'd said. "This has all been a lot to take in." "I think that's best," I agreed. "Tell Dad I'm not angry. I just need to regroup." "He's been up since dawn, going through financial records," she told me. "I don't think he's slept much. It's the first time in years I've seen him face things head-on instead of hiding them." Melissa's Thanksgiving gathering was lively and uncomplicated. Friends and neighbors coming and going throughout the day, everyone contributing dishes, no rigid schedule or expectations. I helped mash potatoes and arrange charcuterie boards, grateful for the simple tasks and easy conversation. "You look different today," Samantha observed as we set the table. "Lighter somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I've set down a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying." Around 3 o'clock, as people were beginning to fill their plates, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "If you're up for company, I'd like to stop by briefly." "Just me." I stepped outside to call her. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she assured me. "I just found something I thought you might want to see." No pressure. 30 minutes later, Mom arrived at Melissa's house, carrying a worn leather photo album I'd never seen before. Melissa offered her a plate, which she politely declined. "I won't stay long," she said. "I know you have friends to get back to." We sat on Melissa's front porch swing, the sounds of Thanksgiving laughter drifting through the open windows behind us. Mom carefully opened the album on her lap. "I've kept this hidden in my hope chest for years," she explained. "Your father doesn't even know it exists." The first page held a black and white photo of a young woman in 1960s attire, her expression serious but kind. "My mother," Mom explained. "Your grandmother. She died before you were born." "You never talk about her," I said. "No. It was too painful." Mom took a deep breath. "She stood up to my father once, about his drinking and how he treated me. He threw her out of the house. She died 6 months later in a nursing home, alone." I stared at the photograph, seeing echoes of my mother's features in my grandmother's face. "I'm so sorry. I promised myself I would never challenge your father the way she challenged mine," Mom continued, turning the page. I thought keeping the peace was the best way to protect our family. The next several pages held photos I'd never seen. Mom as a young woman, hair long and flowing, at what appeared to be protest rallies. Another showed her in a cap and gown, proudly holding a diploma. "You never told me you were politically active," I said, surprised. "There's a lot I never told you. I was studying to be a lawyer before I met your father. I had a full scholarship to Vanderbilt." She smiled sadly. "I thought I would change the world." "What happened?" "I fell in love. Your father was different then. Charismatic, ambitious. When he said a man needed a supportive wife, not a competitor, I believed that was what love required." She turned another page, revealing photos of me as a baby, as a toddler, as a serious-faced elementary school student. "I channeled all my abandoned ambitions into you. I saw myself in your determination, your intelligence. Is that why Dad was harder on me? Because he saw your independence in me?" Mom nodded slowly. "I think so, though he would never admit it. He loved you, Autumn. Still does. But I think you frightened him in a way Ryan never did." We sat quietly, turning pages, revisiting a family history I'd never fully known. Photos of school plays, science fairs, family vacations, a visual record of both happy moments and the gradually widening distance between my father and me. "Why are you showing me this now?" I finally asked, "Because I don't want to repeat my mother's mistakes or my own." She closed the album and placed it in my lap. "This belongs to you now. And so does my apology. I should have been stronger. Should have stood up for you. Protected you." "You did the best you could," I said, meaning it. "No," she replied firmly. "I didn't. But I'm starting now." She took my hand. "Your father and I had a long talk last night. About everything. The finances, Ryan's problems, how we've treated you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "How did he take it?" "Better than I expected. I think seeing everything laid bare yesterday, the house, the debts, how much you've sacrificed for us, it broke something open in him." She squeezed my hand. "He's not good at showing it, but he's proud of you, Autumn. Always has been, in his way. Scared of you too, of your intelligence, your independence." It reminded him of his own limitations. As the afternoon light began to fade, Mom stood to leave. "No pressure about Christmas or future holidays. Just know there's a place for you whenever you're ready." After she left, I rejoined Samantha and the others inside, the photo album tucked safely in my bag. The conversation, the food, the warmth, it all felt more meaningful somehow, colored by this new understanding of my family and myself. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. The first text he'd ever sent me. "Thank you for giving us the chance to do better, Dad." Not an apology exactly, but a beginning. I returned to New York 3 days later with a clarity I hadn't possessed before. The first thing I did was schedule an appointment with a therapist specializing in family trauma, something I'd considered for years, but always postponed. The second was to set up a more formal financial arrangement for my parents' house, with clear terms and transparency requirements. Work took on a different dimension too. I found myself less desperate for validation from clients and supervisors. My worth wasn't tied to their approval any more than it had been tied to my father's. This newfound confidence translated into more authentic client relationships and, ironically, greater success. 1 year later, I returned to Nashville for Thanksgiving again. Much had changed in 12 months. My father had scaled down his construction business to something manageable and was actually turning a modest profit again. Mom had returned to school to finish her long-abandoned degree. Ryan, after hitting a painful rock bottom, was 6 months into recovery and attending regular Gamblers Anonymous meetings. The family gathering wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, old patterns that threatened to reassert themselves. But there was also honesty. When Dad started to dismiss my recent promotion, he caught himself mid-sentence, paused, and instead asked questions about what the new role entailed. When Ryan began making excuses for missing a family dinner the previous week, he stopped, took a deep breath, and simply said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there." I'm still learning how to face difficult situations without escaping. After dinner, Dad asked to speak with me privately. We stood on the back porch, watching the neighbor's cat stalk through fallen leaves. "I've been thinking about what you said last year," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "About feeling worthless because of how I treated you." I waited, giving him space to find his words. "My father," he continued, "never once told me I had value beyond what I could provide. A man was his work, his ability to support his family. Nothing else mattered." He looked down at his weathered hands. "I didn't know how to value you outside of that framework. Your independence threatened everything I thought I knew about family, about my role as a father." "I understand that better now," I said. "That doesn't make it right," he replied. "I missed so much, Autumn. Your growth, your accomplishments. I was so busy protecting my ego that I couldn't see the incredible person you were becoming." He met my eyes directly. "I'm proud of you. Not just for the financial help, though I'm grateful for that too. I'm proud of the woman you've become despite my failings." It wasn't a Hollywood moment with swelling music and tearful embraces. We were both too reserved, too shaped by our history for that. But as we stood side by side in the gathering darkness, something long broken between us began to mend. The journey toward healing isn't linear. There are still difficult conversations, misunderstandings, and moments when old wounds reopen. But there is also growth. My mother finds her voice more often now. My father is learning, slowly, to value connection over control. Ryan works his recovery program one day at a time. As for me, I'm learning that strength isn't about independence alone. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is remain connected, even when it's painful. Set boundaries without building walls. Offer forgiveness without forgetting the lessons of the past. The mortgage on my parents' house remains in my name, but it's no longer a secret. It's a choice I make openly, a contribution to a family system that now acknowledges my worth. Perhaps someday the financial dynamics will shift again, but what matters is the honesty with which we approach them. I still remember that moment on the porch last Thanksgiving, my father's cold face, my brother's smirk, the keys to my old room dangling mockingly. "We don't have a daughter," he had said. But he was wrong. They did have a daughter. They always had. Sometimes the people who should see us most clearly are the ones most blinded by their own expectations and fears. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Financial independence gave me the power to demand recognition, but I was valuable long before I could pay a mortgage. So are you. Have you ever had to stand up to family in a difficult moment? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find their voice. And if you found value in my journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. Remember, sometimes the most painful confrontations lead to the most meaningful healing. Thank you for listening, and may your own family gatherings be filled with honesty, respect, and genuine connection.